With the recent events in social justice and police brutality, we sit down with Malik Robertson on his thoughts about the origin of the police and their role and necessity in today's society.
I believe that a person that hates a particular race of people would be compelled to have sex with them just as a way of power.
After the raping of Ressie Taylor, Alexis Jones is an open book for us to discuss the effects of rape and what it may be like for victims to move on afterwards.
Yes. Without integration, it allows a group to be easily marginalized and discriminated against, such as what happened under the Second but Equal period.
Revisiting the heinous crime of the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church that occurs days after the integration of the Alabama school system, Rika Washington discusses the effects of integration and the not-so-subtle difference in PWIs and HBCUs.
So as I think about slave trade and how it relates to human trafficking, I really don't think there's no difference at all.
A 2008 excavation reveals what is presumed as one of the slave jails thought to be ran by Robert Lumpkin, one of history's most notorious slave traders. Tonight we talk to Winnie Davis Key on the presence of modern-day slavery and the controversial legacy of Robert Lumpkin. The controversial story of Henrietta Lacks has been one of the biggest advancements in medical history ever. Dr. Davina Betts talks to us about the ethical aspect of the Henrietta Lacks story, as well as her professional thoughts and opinions on how the situation was handled. Public confrontations between black and white protesters lead to the burning of black businesses and homes after the arrest of Dick Rowland over an elevator assault. Dr. Timla Washington shares her thoughts on the legal side of things and the injustice that plagues the black community.
Michael Brown was a black man in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was a victim of radical white nationalism.
The lynching of Michael Douglas is another injustice within the black community. This time it comes after the jury declared a mistrial. Nehemiah Key sits down to talk to us about the inevitable truth behind white privilege and what it means to be a black man. You're watching WUNK News. Under recent events in social justice, this year has been one of the most eventful when it comes to police brutality. Tonight, Malik Robertson, a personal trainer from Georgia, shares his thoughts on the origins of the police and why we may need them more than we think. Policemen, though they have not always been known under that name, have been around since slave times. Formerly known as slave patrols, some may argue that the police still have the same roles as those slave patrols.
I believe today's police are related to that origin, what the origin of where they came from, because they're still killing black men, they're still incarcerating black men, well, black people in general. It's still like a high rate of black people that's being incarcerated and that's being killed by the police, just like how it was back then.
Rules and regulations have been implemented to try and resolve the issue of discrimination and police brutality against blacks, such as enrollment in Black History class, but some see this as a waste of time and ultimately see the police as somewhat unnecessary.
I believe a lot of police officers today don't really know where being a police officer started. People dream about being a police officer. Like people want to be a police officer, but I don't want to be that guy. But it's like I believe a lot of white Americans still want to be a police officer because because like the racism still exists. But the reason I just get enrolled into like a history class is like I just feel like a lot of police officers just don't know where like why we even needed them in the first place. Police are necessary because they're supposed to serve and protect. Like we need police because we're not as citizens, we're not really supposed to be taking matters in our own hands.
There has been much talk around defunding the police force in numerous states, and some places are taking that idea very seriously. In other related news, Police Chief Angela Green of Portsmouth has been fired in regards to charges filed against the state senator and others. In the midst of being fired, Chief Green threatens to sue the city for wrongful termination. The firing of Police Chief Angela Green on Monday seems to be something that has been in the works for a while, considering that she was placed on administrative leave a few months back. In a meeting on Monday morning before press, Green stated, the charges filed by Green in mid-August were against Senator Lucas, various NAACP members, and several school board members and public defenders. Many of the charges were dismissed on Monday as well. A Memphis police officer has been relieved of duty under suspicion of rape. The officer's lawyer claims that any form of sexual contact between his client and the victim was strictly consensual. Here is our anchor Tyler Washington with more details on the story. As this case unfolds, victim advocates encourage that coming forward about being raped is the first step in the recovery process. Tonight, we sit down for our second interview of the night with Alexis Jones, creative specialist at Fahrenheit Creative Group, and discuss the incident of Ressie Taylor being raped by 7 men. We will hear her thoughts on the incident and what it may be like for someone coping with rape. Next. A victim by the name of Ressie Taylor was raped by Private Herbert Lovett and 6 other men. Tonight we have creative specialist Alexis Jones, who took the time to discuss the effects that rape victims may face and what it's like for them to move on. Ressie Taylor was a victim of rape. Abducted by 7 men and threatened to comply, Ressie was only one of many black rape victims during that time period, and the numbers continue to grow today. The motives as to why someone could commit such a crime is baffling to most, but the long-term effects of the trauma are evident in the black community.
I believe that a person that hates a particular race of people would be compelled to have sex with them just as a way of power. I think that sex is very vulnerable and very intimate, and participating in that is giving your body away to someone, and I think they take advantage of that and use people in that manner, and they come out feeling like they're in power. And also considering black women and how they're typically referred to as angry, I think that years of rape contributed to this aggressive behavior because their bodies have been objectified for so long that they have a defense mechanism set up where they don't readily accept love.
One of the long-term effects of being a rape victim include troubles with intimacy after the incident. Not only does the experience traumatize the victims, but many of them take years to recover and become intimate with their spouses again.
I think that one of the big challenges that rape victims face with their spouses is just a general lack of trust, considering that rape is a betrayal of trust in most instances. It may be hard for them to let that person in to be intimate and to have those intimate moments.
If you or someone you know is a victim of rape, please call 1-800-656-4673 for help and guidance with coping with your own trauma. On Monday, a former LSU running back is facing charges of sexual assault. Reports show that the victim made the assault known to LSU officials, but little was done to investigate. Former running back Darius Geis and several other LSU football players are under allegations of sexual assault. Not only were LSU officials made aware of the incident, but they proceeded to ignore it. When attempting to implement some kind of disciplinary actions, the players received deferred suspension. 9 players have been under investigations of sexual assault and dating violence since Ed Aragon became interim head coach. In a statement on Monday, Aragon stated, Darius Geis was dropped by the Washington Redskins after being arrested on 3 separate charges of domestic violence in August. 2 men witnessed a raping and take it upon themselves to intervene. Officials say the incident occurred in broad daylight in a New Orleans suburb. 2 Good Samaritans witnessed a 60-year-old woman being raped by 28-year-old Celius Gray in a New Orleans suburb. As they witnessed the incident, the two men did not hesitate to intervene and pull Gray off the woman. Silius fled the scene but was later apprehended by police. He told the officers that the woman said that she wanted him before admitting that she pulled his hair to get him off of her. Gray is facing charges of first-degree rape, theft of less than $1,000, and resisting arrest by not identifying himself. His bond is currently at $501,000. After the break, we sit down with Rico Washington, who gives us his thoughts on integration of schools and how it's having a negative or positive effect on black students. The integration of the Alabama school system was one of the most controversial court decisions ever made. And even though these schools proposed equal rights and equal opportunity, some may question the opportunities available at PWIs versus HBCUs. The integration of the Alabama school system resulted in the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church. The bombing resulted in the deaths of 4 young girls inside the church at the time. The results of the new integration laws were and still are questionable. Many wonder if the integration of schools was even the best thing for black students, and why many black students are choosing PWIs over HBCUs.
Yes. Without integration, it allows a group to be easily marginalized and discriminated against, such as what happened under the Separate but Equal period. Separation also promotes the idea among blacks and whites that we are not equal. Almost all universities are for profit, and enrollment is how they maintain and increase revenue and profit. HBCUs must attract students of all backgrounds in order to continue their business and improve their financial situation and support a quality education. Quality student graduates mean hireable graduates that will hopefully promote a positive opinion of the university's quality of education, thus appealing to more students and corporations looking to add to their workforce.
The bombing of the church seems random, but there are a few that try to relate the bombing to the integration issue. To think that so many talented and smart black students commit to schools that would rather invest mostly in their white counterparts is another reason why some question the benefit of black students attending PWIs.
Right. The bombing of any institution where people are in attendance or regularly attend reflects the harmful label that omnipresent in the U.S. While most of us don't go to the extreme, we are all witnesses to the everyday discussions about issues surrounding race, equality, gender equality, and religion. The mainstream and local television and radio media consistently provide divisive rhetoric that does harm by influencing those who listen to it regularly and build up their hatred for the opposing opinion. I also would like to add that a person's education is not primarily dependent on the availability of a physical structure. So the bombing of the church only provides an obstacle, but never stops the growth of those who seek education. It's highly unlikely that all blacks respond to new PWI to attend HBCUs due to many factors, including economic, coaching, parent relationships, and exposure. Most top recruits are going to attend large universities where facilities, access, and access are at its best. HBCUs do not have the financial support to compete with the larger, more popular universities in that area. The focus for HBCUs since the inception has been to provide opportunities for black students, where opportunities are limited at predominantly white institutions due to financial costs and other barriers. This will always be the basis of financial equality for blacks reaches below the line.
The children that died in the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church were between the ages of 11 and 14. 2 church fires in Brewster, Washington has investigators suspecting arson. The pastor is calling the damage catastrophic. Here is anchor Tyler Washington with the details on tonight's story. The investigation is still ongoing, and investigators have no suspects in custody. In the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, a Macon, Georgia church is looking to be a beacon of hope by giving out food to those in need. The church encourages those in need to come because there's plenty of supplies to go around. The Greater Lizzieboro Baptist Church is hosting a food drive this coming Saturday morning at 10 a.m. The church is expecting a large turnout and is looking for volunteers as well. The church's address is 1180 Fort Hill Street in Macon. If you are looking to volunteer, please call 478-745-3858. Coming up next, we talk to Wayne Davis Key about former slave trader Robert Lumpkin. We will discuss the presence of modern-day slavery in today's society and the history behind an excavated slave prison. More next. The reputation of Robert Lumpkin precedes him as a famous slave trader. Being so famous, Lumpkin was even the owner of various slave prisons, one of which was found back in 2008. With the presence of modern-day slavery, the discovery and excavation of the prison raises serious questions. Slavery has been abolished for over 100 years, but that does not negate the presence of slavery in today's society, one of which is human trafficking. Because of the presence of this type of slavery, it raises the question of if the excavation of the prison is even necessary.
So as I think about slave trade and how it relates to human trafficking, I really don't think there's no difference at all. When you think about slave trade, it's really controlling a human life against their own will. In terms of excavation, should excavation take place? I think, if it can help, especially if you're trying to resolve or solve as it relates to human trafficking. In slavery, yes, it can help. It can help to tell the story, right? It helps us to learn about all the atrocities that took place.
Some people look at the excavation of the slave prison as an opportunity to learn more about the history of Lumpkin and his slave involvement. Others could look at it as a bad idea overall, questioning what is there to actually learn from the excavation and if there is any form of closure after excavating the site.
So when I think about what could be learned from Lumpkin's history, one of the worst slave traders ever, I think it's important that we just understand the mindset of the slave owners, and I think we can share that with our children. I think we can just study the whole process of slavery.
There are about 50,000 people that go into human trafficking every year in the United States, most of which come from Mexico and the Philippines. Slaves have been a vital part of history since the Israelites under the rule of Pharaoh. Regardless of his popularity, one famous historical figure is presumed to have owned his own slaves. Here is our anchor Tyler Washington with the facts on this myth. Alexander Hamilton's character in the popular musical Hamilton is not depicted as a slave owner, as the writer was going for a more diverse stage play. A Tennessee family is suing Metro Nashville Public School District over an assignment that taught fourth graders how to keep black slaves under control. The family claims that the assignment contained speech that was dehumanizing, vile, and racist. A teacher handed out an assignment titled, "Let's Make a Slave," to a fourth grade class. After finding out about the assignment, the family claimed that it caused physical and emotional harm to the child, who has autism spectrum disorder. Reports say that the child received racial harassment by adults and peers. The teacher, Andrew Herman, and school district supposedly knew of the harassment, but were indifferent about the incident. After the break, we sit down with Dr. Davina Betts as we discuss the story of Henrietta Lacks and the ethical aspects of the story. Coming up. The story of Henrietta Lacks is the story that sparked the interest of millions of medical professionals around the world and changed the medical field forever. However, what is a very interesting story also conflicts with the question of how ethical the story is as well. Henrietta Lacks' constantly dividing cells was the breakthrough of the medical field. These immortal cells have allowed health professionals to create various vaccines and cure numerous diseases. However, getting the cells is where the story becomes unethical, as the cells were taken without the consent of Henrietta or her family. Now we wonder if it's okay to steal cells to save countless lives, and does being white or black have to do with the cells being taken at all?
I don't believe that anyone's body tissue should be biopsied or studied without their permission. At the time that Henrietta Lacks was treated, white people weren't respected as individuals, which is most likely why this occurred. Yes, the result of her cells has changed the world, but what an honor it would have been to share what her body would do for medicine and compensate her accordingly. If she were white, I believe that permission would be obtained and she would have been compensated.
What was done to the Lacks family was, beyond a shadow of a doubt, wrong. But is this situation something that money can fix? Not only were these cells taken, but very little was done to save the life of Henrietta, nor was she told of her medical issue.
Her family should be compensated due to so many medical breakthroughs that have been gained and still obtained as a result of understanding the science of her cells, leading to medical knowledge and advancement.
The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks is now a #1 New York Times bestseller and an HBO film. A second effective COVID-19 vaccine comes from a biotech company called Moderna Incorporated. The supposed vaccine comes just in time as the world reaches a total of 50 million cases. The Moderna COVID-19 vaccine has been proven 94.5% effective at preventing the virus. Based on the clinical trials performed on 30,000 volunteers, the virus has also been proven to prevent severe cases as well. On Monday, Moderna says that they will be able to ship out 20 million vaccines to the U.S. by the end of 2020. By next year, they expect to be able to distribute about 500 million to 1 billion doses worldwide. Since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, health professionals have been working diligently to provide care to sick patients as well as better understand the virus. A new breakthrough, however, has brought forth new information that can explain why some patients become sicker than others. Scientific research shows that a majority of patients become sicker than others because their immune systems have antibodies that disable key immune system proteins called interferons. This finding is critical to offering effective treatment to those with severe cases. Men seem to be among those that lack the interferon protein the most. After the break, we interviewed Dr. Timla Washington and discussed the mistrial of Dick Rowland and its relevance in today's society in terms of how black men are viewed and the white privilege involved in protesting. Dick Rowland was one of the many men accused of assaulting white women. However, Rowland's case resulted in a mistrial which outraged the white community in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Riots and mobs of whites and blacks erupted and ultimately led to the burning of a black community. In the light of recent riots and protests, one can wonder how the police allow something so violent as this to happen. Dick Rowland's mistrial was the spark that lit the flame of the riots in Tulsa, Oklahoma one late evening in May 1921. Not only were businesses and homes of blacks set ablaze by these white protesters, but it lasted at least 2 days. Concerns of if the police allowed these people to have their way in the community, or if they even cared to stop them, was at the forefront of the residents' minds.
In my opinion, when you hold the gavel and the gun, in your eyes, whites don't do anything wrong. And so therefore, you demonize blacks and what they're doing and don't consider it as a symbol of freedom of expression. If a black is doing something wrong, even if it's looting in comparison to what whites are doing, they will consider that as being something that is against moral standards of the law, looked upon as being criminal activity.
and simply, too, because of the color of their skin. That's the first determining factor, in my opinion.
These types of situations are prime examples of what is wrong with the criminal justice system. Most times, blacks are wrongly convicted of crimes they did not commit and serve lengthy and unreasonable sentences. The few times that they are allowed to walk free and actually beat the charges against them, the white community feels as though they have to take matters into their own hands. They will do anything they can to present a believable lie about a black man to tear them down and ultimately keep them down.
Doesn't mean anything. It simply means that because you're black, you're guilty until proven innocent. And our jail systems can prove that. They don't ask questions. They arrest you first, and then they figure out if they want to ask you questions later. They should do something, in my opinion, create a legal team or lobby members of Congress, whatever, boycott these white establishments.
What some may not know about the mistrial was that the white woman in the elevator declined to prosecute Rowland. As election voting is wrapping up and with Biden projected as the new president-elect, protesters take to the streets in protest of the results. These protests have also resulted in the arrest of nearly 24 Trump supporters. The arrest of nearly 24 protesting Trump supporters came during and after the protest, as what was originally peaceful took a violent turn as one protester proceeded to light a firework in the street. Another protester went as far as to get into an altercation with another man and punched him unconscious. A stabbing was also reported, as well as several protesters carrying firearms. Protesters continued to shout, "Stop the steal," and count every vote as they marched through the streets. There is still no evidence of voter fraud or other issues to reverse the vote. Long after the protest over the death of George Floyd concluded in Cleveland, Ohio, charges are finally being dropped against two men accused of rioting and conspiracy. Anchor Tyler Washington has the details on the story. The FBI believed that they had a well-developed case against the men, with the text message as a form of evidence. Coming up next, we sit down to talk to Nehemiah Key about the case of Michael Donald and the hard truth that comes with being a black man. Joseph Anderson was charged with the murder of a white policeman in Birmingham, Alabama. Instead of being tried in Birmingham, the trial was moved to Mobile and was eventually declared a mistrial. Members of Unit 900 of the United Klans of America were outraged and took it upon themselves to take justice into their own hands. They saw a black man walking home and lured him into a car at gunpoint. That man, Michael Donald, was lynched moments later. These types of situations in which whites feel as though they have to take justice into their own hands and commit such a crime really resonates in the black community. Whether Michael Donald was guilty or not, he was a victim of a system that never truly cared for his well-being. Not only that, but it makes you wonder if and when you or a loved one will suffer the same fate, and for what reason.
Michael Donald was a black man in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was a victim of radical white nationalism and is detrimental to African Americans in this country. The law doesn't really turn their head to this violence because they're the same ones that commit these same acts.
It is a sad existence when a black man has to be concerned with how he looks or what he says in order to stay alive and avoid confrontation with a white person. This is not only relevant to Michael Donald, but it is also relevant in today's cases such as Trayvon Martin.
To survive in a negative encounter, a black man or woman must avoid people who have ill intentions. It is the case for many black people, unfortunately, such as Trayvon Martin. He was similar in that he was minding his business, yet a white man deemed him fit to kill.
This year alone, 164 black people have died at the hands of police. A man was arrested for driving his car into a crowd of protesters in Virginia. According to Henrico County Commonwealth's attorney, the man arrested is a member of the Ku Klux Klan and a propagandist for Confederate ideology. A man by the name of Harry Rogers, 36 years old, was arrested and charged with felony vandalism, assault and battery, and attempted malicious wounding. Witnesses say that the engine revved and proceeded to drive through the crowd. Hate crime charges against Harry are still pending. A man receives a threatening sign from a member of the Ku Klux Klan for owning a Biden-Harris campaign sign. They even went as far as to scatter Ku Klux Klan business cards across the yard. Here is our anchor Tyler Washington with the details. Police say that no one has filed a complaint with the police just yet. I want to thank you all for tuning in to WUNK News. Have a blessed night.